Hello, I'm Emma Hawker, Impact and Projects Manager at Governors for Schools, and I'm here with Leyla Gambell and Susannah Butcher to talk about how school governors can create an inclusive culture in their schools. This conversation forms part of our Inclusive Governance campaign, an initiative that encourages a wider pool of volunteers to take up the all-important governing roles and help champion inclusivity in schools. Our Inclusive Governance campaign has been sponsored by Governor Hub, and we'd like to extend our thanks to them for their support with this important topic. So without further ado, please could you both tell us a bit about yourselves?
I'm Leyla, and my background is in teaching originally. I've been a teacher for more years than I care to remember, but in more recent years I've taken a role in SEND. So I've been a primary SENco for 6 years, and I've recently moved roles into secondary SEND. So my interest sort of spans across the sectors really, and I'm very passionate about special educational needs. I also write for Times Educational Supplement, which is where Governors for Schools originally saw an article that I wrote on inclusivity in primary school, which has sort of brought us here today. And I've also got Susannah with me.
I started off as a banker back in the day, but I have worked as a TA at schools, mainly in reception class for 17 years, but retired 7 years ago. But I've also been a governor at the school for an awfully long time, and 3 years ago became chair of governors. And I have responsibility for SEND and well-being in the school. So have worked quite closely with Leyla whilst she was at the school, learning and encouraging and enabling and being very enthusiastic about all the inclusive measures that she's been introducing.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So to start things off, I thought it might be really helpful to get your take on what you think governors can do to try and help foster a culture of inclusivity.
Well, I think certainly in the school that we were at, I obviously met very regularly with Leyla over and discussed what was happening in the school with SEND. But as soon as there was a sort of her inclusivity group, obviously loved going to their meetings, loved encouraging all their ideas, loved just speaking to them, which kind of just widened the scope of what the governors understood, because I could then report back to the governing board about what they were doing, and they would also get enthusiastic about all the activities that were happening. They could see the positive results of them so well with the children, which was just wonderful to see.
But from my point of view, I always felt really supported by Susannah. I knew that she attended relevant training courses to do with SEND because she'd come and tell me about them. And when we met regularly, it was always in a spirit of cooperation and support. Although she asked relevant questions and sort of probed to sort of dig a bit deeper into how SEND was going when we met, it was always in that kind of cooperative spirit, and I felt really well supported. I think that Susannah coming along to the Inclusion Action Team meetings made a real difference, not only obviously as she said in her understanding of what that group was achieving, but also for the children as well, because it meant that they knew who their chair of governors was and they had a better understanding of her role in the school, but also they could see that she was interested in them and they could see that she was interested in what we were trying to achieve. And to be honest, a bit like today, she was always just game to bowl in and help out with whatever I asked her to do, which was always extremely helpful and very valued.
That sounds really great, and I think that's so important to kind of have that support and that open communication, and as you say, being able to provide that kind of challenge, but in a supportive way, in a way that kind of everyone is always working for the same outcomes together. It's brilliant. I wonder if you've got any thoughts, Susannah, particularly on capturing that pupil voice and making sure that we're really including pupils and hearing from them and getting their experience.
Yeah, that's always an interesting thing to do. And in fact, I actually once at one of our meetings said to Leyla, is there anything that I can actually do to help? And Leyla said, well, actually, yes, you can capture some pupil voice. So I did come in and sit with some of her SEND pupils, and we went through, well, we had lots of lovely conversations, I mean, about all sorts of random things, as you can imagine, but I did manage to capture using little cue cards how they were feeling, and yeah, it was useful. I think it was useful for me. I don't know. Hopefully, it was useful for Leyla, but she definitely found out what some of the children were thinking, and I think it's sometimes better coming from a person who they don't see every single day of the week, coming from somebody else. They know who I am, so I'm not a strange person, but well, perhaps I am, but not an unusual person to come into school. But it was somebody a little bit different, so perhaps you got us, I don't know whether it was more accurate, hopefully an accurate picture of how they were feeling.
That's what we were hoping for, and
Yeah.
I think it did really help that Susannah did that, because at the time I was really mindful. I'd done some, I can't remember when it was perhaps just before we set up
Yes.
the inclusion action team. I was really mindful that when I carried out pupil voice with pupils, because I already had a good relationship with them, quite often I would ask them questions like, are you happy at school? Do you feel safe at school? And I would always kind of feel that perhaps they were answering in a way that they wanted to please me and give me the right answers. And I was really mindful that actually what I wanted was, them to feel confident to give their voice. So Susannah was kind of a useful neutral party, if you like, in that they recognised her, but she wasn't one of their daily people. So the aim was that they could give her kind of hopefully an honest answer. Not that obviously, I was concerned that they obviously weren't happy at school, but I think it was really helpful in having somebody from a little bit outside coming in and just having a bit of a different perspective with them, and that was helpful. I think that kind of discussion about how to collect pupil voice, part of what then led on to the group being set up, because it is difficult to gather send pupil voice.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you. Could you tell us a bit more about the group?
Yeah, so it was sort of born out of a number of conversations really about how to accurately hear from our SEND pupils, but also how to provide some kind of space where they could perhaps meet together. Because I was really mindful that when I was talking in isolation with SEND pupils, actually common themes arose that I was aware that they could potentially be supporting each other with, and it was a kind of we had several conversations on how to facilitate that, because what I didn't want was to provide a group where we were saying, oh, you've got SEND and you've got SEND, let's put you together and see if you guys can get on. I wanted it to be broader than that. So in the end we devised a group that I introduced to each class in the school, and I went around each class and I talked them through part of we were already obviously they were already familiar with language of neurodivergent and sort of specific needs, so that piece of work had already been done and was ongoing. And so I explained to them that to continue with that, I was producing this group and I was looking for young pupils who were either neurodivergent, had neurodivergent siblings or parents or family members, or who were just interested in neurodivergence, and that anybody was sort of welcome to come along. Staff then kind of selected a few pupils, because obviously we couldn't take everybody, and they kind of tried to identify sort of some key pupils, but to get a bit of a mix as well. And we ended up with about 15 from across the school, of which there was a broad sort of spectrum of some young people who had SEND, some who had siblings with SEND, and a couple that just had a particular interest. So it was a really interesting mix, and that's kind of where we started.
And they actually really support each other really well when they're in the group together. The group dynamics work incredibly well. So it was a good selection, a good team.
That must have been really great to see all of that come together and then kind of the impact on those pupils. Was there anything that the board was able to do that supported with that? I know you talked a little bit about coming along to those meetings and kind of communicating with those pupils a bit, Susannah, but was there anything else as a board that you did to help facilitate all of that?
I'm not sure that we actually did anything very much more practical. We did provide one of their ideas was to have fidget toys for the whole school, which is something that they wanted to introduce, and it was something that was reasonably easy to do. So the governors did actually cough up and provide some fidget toys. So that was our practical sort of thing to do. We also were very much aware when Leyla left and we had to recruit a new SENco, and they were involved in the process. I think the rest of the governors were just amazed and so pleased to hear that actually their voice was heard, and I was actually in on that interview, or the various interviews and the discussion afterwards. And they were so insightful, these children. It was just amazing. So to be able to report back to the board that their input into something like that is fantastic. So yeah, as I say, I'm not sure we did anything more practical apart from sort of just go along to meetings. I did provide one of the adults because they also had some. They wanted to speak to grown-ups who were neurodiverse, which was a wonderful thing for them to be able to do, to see that there is kind of life after school and what people with their sort of different brains do actually do for a living. So I did provide my son for that, so that was handy. That was a practical bit of help.
It's very practical.
What a fantastic thing to do, and to help those children feel really inspired and motivated and look at those longer term plans. How exciting. I really love that. That's great. That sounds really, really positive. And I guess it must have felt quite empowering for those pupils as well, to feel like you're really listening to the things that they said.
Oh, I think it did, because, as I say, they were just amazing at sort of the question. I mean, obviously they had thought about their questions beforehand. It wasn't just off the cuff, but their questioning of potential SENs or SENco was wonderful, and their ability to speak about the responses that they heard, fantastic, really, really insightful.
I really like that idea. I think that's absolutely so valuable and such an important part of that process. So perhaps to any other governors who are kind of going through that process at their school, I think that's such a nice idea to say, can we make sure that we're including this pupil voice in their process? Brilliant. Thinking about working with pupils and going into school and things, what kind of things do you think you might see in an inclusive school? So if governors are going on school visits and things, what might help them get a sense of what inclusivity is like in the school environment?
I think if you go into a classroom and if you are very often aware of the children that struggle with various things in the classroom, and you can tell the way the teachers or the TAs relate to them, that there is some support there that is particular for each child, and it may be a separate laptop or something as obvious as that. It may just be where they're sitting in the class so that they are given the support that they need and can see and can hear and aren't distracted by the rest of the shenanigans that go on in a classroom. So I think you can really tell in a class that if you've got a teacher that is aware of the needs of each of their children, you can really tell that what's happening in the classroom, and a governor can watch that happening. And actually, it's a really interesting thing to do when you go into a classroom, is to watch how the support is given in just really very small ways. Sometimes it doesn't have to be major. You don't have to be sitting with a child all the time holding their hands. It's just sort of checking in and making sure that they're kind of on track and are okay with what's going on, and if they need 5 minutes, they can have their 5 minutes, and if they need a wobble cushion, they can have their wobble cushion, or just little things like that really help them focus on what's being taught.
I think it goes back to that wider ethos as well, and that was what we were sort of really looking to build, and that's exactly mirrors what Susannah was saying, was that actually within the classes as well, the sort of whole school model of inclusivity, where staff were aware of the child's needs, were aware of what broader needs looked like, and were aware of common and agreed strategies to support children. So, for example, we use zones of regulation as a whole school emotional regulation tool, so that, you know, when class transitions happened, actually, you know, it was quite straightforward, because teachers, midday meal supervisors, people use the same language, whether they were in their normal class, whether they'd moved class, whether they were on the playground, and that there was that wider understanding of behaviour being a communication, and what is that young person or pupil trying to say to us, as opposed to, you know, actually that child is not behaving. Okay, well, they're not behaving, but what is the need, and what do they need from us? And I think that's a really important thing to try and build in an inclusive school. And yeah, certainly where we were going. We also asked the children. That was the first thing I did when we set the group up. I got them to draw me a picture of what an inclusive school looked like, and we talked about what inclusion meant, and how that might be represented. And they came up with their own ideas, which we then worked on. And obviously the tuck shop, although, you know, it was quite an interesting one. That's, you know, we did work on that, because they said, well, we think inclusion means everybody should be able to have a snack at break time. And they said sometimes people come in and they haven't got a snack, and that upsets us or worries us, or that was something as a group they came up with, and we worked on that, and we developed the tuck shop. So I think that listening to what the children think and building on that is also important.
The budgie bench as well, your budgie bench in the playground was another one of their ideas.
Yes, playtimes and break times were a clear focus that they had, obviously, because that's an important part of being a child, and that was their kind of steer, really.
And I think that's really where, as governors, this coming year, we're going to have to agree some expenditure to develop our playgrounds and our field to make those playtimes and lunch times better for the children. So that's something, that's an action as a governor, is getting your budgeting correct, and especially in times where budgets aren't exactly huge at the moment, and it's tough, but it's an area that really needs to be developed in our school, and so we just need to make sure that it's high on the priority of spending, so that we give the children every opportunity they can to have a great playtime and a great lunchtime instead of a traumatic one.
I think that is such an important point, actually, especially, like you say, as budgets are really being squeezed in, and perhaps for any governors who aren't necessarily thinking about that holistic school experience, it's not just what's happening in the classroom. Break times, playtime, such an important part of what will impact those young people. I think that's a really important point there, and I think you're absolutely right. We'd really like to see governors remembering all of those kind of things, and it's, you know, so many different parts of the children's school day. Fantastic. Thinking about the vision and the ethos and what we were talking about then in terms of the school, what do you think governors can do in terms of setting that kind of vision for the school, setting that strategic direction that makes sure that inclusivity is a really key part of that?
Well, we're a Church of England aided school, so we have a Christian vision and Christian values, and our Christian vision is from John as Jesus as the vine, and I just think that is just an ideal vision to include everybody within the community, and the support, the vine as the support, and enabling everybody to grow and flourish and bear fruit. And I think that is just such a good vision for an inclusive school, because it does include everybody, it does support everybody, and it enables everybody to just be the best they possibly can.
That does sound like a really lovely inclusive vision for everyone. And thinking about including everybody, have you got any thoughts about how the governing body can make sure that things like communication are really inclusive of all stakeholders? So not just the children and young people, but families, parents, how we can make sure that things that are coming from within the school and being communicated outwards are inclusive of everyone in that wider community?
For Susannah, what I will say is that I ran some parent groups termly, and Susannah would come along to those whenever she could. And so we were actively at that time trying to encourage parent voice, and also to encourage a safe space for the SEND parents to come along to. Although again, like the pupil group, it was open to all parents. It wasn't a particularly targeted group. We did encourage anybody to come along. But Susannah did come along to as many of those as she could and bought cakes.
Oh, absolutely.
And came and supported, and obviously was able to articulate from the governor's perspective, although generally was just there as as another adult to contribute and who was interested in what was going on, but then as a governor could then hear what the parents were saying and kind of take that away really. And I was really grateful that she was able to come along to those, and that I found that really helpful.
I think communication in a school is always a difficult thing. There's always somebody who says that they didn't know that, or and however hard you try, I just don't think you ever get everybody to hear everything. And I do think we really do try quite hard with all our various means of communication. The governors do try and come into school, and we're at parents' evenings there. So if anybody wants to have a chat, then we're there. We do also run the parent voice, the collection of the parent voice every year at a parents' evening, so that we could try and persuade parents to fill in their questionnaire. We try to go to sort of church services as well, which is always a really good time to talk to parents so that they can talk to us. It's that this sort of whole communication and how you relate to all our stakeholders is something that we're really thinking about at the moment, because it is such an important part of our job. I think they're talking that relationship with stakeholders is the fourth core function of the governing body at the moment. And so it's something that we're really focusing on over the next couple of months as a governing body, and really realising how we do relate to children, parents, the local authority, the church, because obviously they play a very big part in our school. So I think it is amazing the number of different ways that we do either communicate or are involved in various things. And as I say, I think it's just a case of governors just being in as many things as you possibly can. Go to all the friends of the school's events if you possibly can. Support them. Support the things
School
with
trips.
the church.
Come on a lot of school trips.
I love a school trip. We do go on a lot of school trips. Go to the concerts. Go to the nativities. And again, that's an excellent time to actually speak to parents and get their view about not only that wonderful nativity that they've just seen, but other things that they think about the school, or things that they want to say, just to get it off their chest, really. But yeah, it's really key, really difficult.
I think you're absolutely right there. I think sometimes if there are governors listening who are kind of thinking school visits are about going in and walking around classrooms and making notes, there are so many other ways to engage with school life, like you say, being present at different events and things. And it sounds really positive that the governors make such an effort to be really present and really visible to members of the school community. That sounds great. And I think another really important point as well, about always thinking about how you can reflect on that communication, that inclusivity, because actually it's not a tick box exercise and going, well, we've done this, this and this for inclusion, so now we can just stop. And it's always about kind of continuing to reflect and consider on things. Is there anything that you think perhaps works particularly well in terms of making the staff feel like it's a very inclusive environment, and the other governors on the board feeling like the board is kind of open and inclusive to governors?
Well, I hope that we are inclusive. as a board. I do think we have an interesting mix of people. We obviously are struggling, like most boards at the moment, to actually recruit governors, which is an ongoing problem, which I can sort of understand. But I mean, we do try and sort of be as flexible as possible with meetings and how we run our meetings, and actually we're fairly laid back so that nobody gets too twitchy about being scared about them. We always have food and biscuits and coffee and things to make it more, well, not more of a social event. It's obviously a business event, but more friendly, I think, really, so that everybody feels able to speak. I certainly don't think that any of the governors are frightened of speaking at a meeting. We have quite robust conversations. So I think it's working to a certain extent. If people have had issues in the past and have come to me for me to then speak to other individuals, and we've sorted those matters out. And I think as long as you can have conversations with your board, then I think it's usually solvable.
I think you're absolutely right. Building those relationships and having those dynamics where people feel that they can be open and honest and have conversations and ask questions and that there's no judgment or anything. I think that's a really great way to make people feel like they can contribute and participate. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was what kind of questions you think governors should be asking, perhaps of themselves in terms of reflection, or asking school leaders around inclusion?
Ooh, I suppose to make sure that, as Susannah has done, whether they've got a clear understanding and have completed the relevant training, so that they can fully understand what good practice in SEND looks like, and what a good model of an inclusive ethos is, in order to be able to have those, I think, like that robust conversation. Yes. Susannah?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do agree. I think training is really important, and there is a lot of training available, to be fair. So I think that is really quite important. You do have to brace yourself to have the conversations sometimes, which is not always easy, but you just have got to have them on occasion. I think you just have to be really enthusiastic as well. And, if somebody's got an idea, you've really got to make sure that you're kind of behind them or with them and going with it, and looking to see how the children react and how the staff react, and to make sure that things do carry on moving forward and evolving, and new ideas are tried. Some may be successful, some less so, but just give it a go. Anything that make the children feel happier, more relaxed, so they can learn better.
I think that sounds really positive. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm going to ask you a bit of a tricky one now. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What can you tell me about one of the things you're most proud of having done in your work with the school? I'm sure. I think there's probably lots and lots of things that sound amazing from the bits that we've heard. So I know it's a bit of a tricky one, but I would love to hear about one of those things you're especially proud of.
I mean, for me, it was moving from what had started off as an idea for gaining pupil voice to what was effectively, by the end, a support group that was re-engaging, disengaged and vulnerable pupils back into school life. And that remains one of the things I'm most proud of, because it, kind of surpassed, all of my expectations with the pupils, with their, with their vision, with their ideas, with what they wanted to achieve, and the clarity of their ideas as well. So it was like Susannah mentioned, the reason why we ended up with her son coming in, and why one of the pupils' parents came in who was autistic himself, was because the children said, well, we'd really like to know what it's like to be a neurodivergent adult. And, to be honest, that hadn't occurred to me to actually build that into the wider school life. And that was their idea, and we, obviously we then enabled that, and they got some really, it was some really lovely sessions that we had, and I think I am really proud of that, because it opened doors and offered so much value, I think, to as well as being able to hear their voices really clearly. It gave each other themselves as well so much support, and that was really lovely.
Yeah, and they, because the Inclusion Action Group were also involved in a deep dive that our school improvement partner came to do, and they were just brilliant. That you just sat with them and you were just so proud of these children who are confident and able to express sensible opinions to a complete stranger. And yeah, I was so proud of them, especially at that point. They did an amazing job. And I think that's just because they've been given the confidence that being neurodiverse is not a bad thing. I think that Leyla's group has really turned kind of negative connotations into positive connotations, and it's never a negative thing. It's always positive. She always turns it round to look at what's good about being neurodiverse. I mean, it's not something that you need to be ashamed of and try and be normal. You just have to look at the positive side of it, and I think that's been a brilliant part of that group, is that it's turned into something really seriously positive, from their perspective, but also from other children's perspectives. They think that they're impressed by what the group does, and so are the staff and the governors. They have just done so brilliantly. It's amazing.
It does sound really incredible, and this is one of the reasons I love conversations like this, because it's inspired me to go back to my own board then and to ask some questions about what we're doing to make sure that we can make sure our pupils feel important and that they have value, and to feel really positive in that way. So it's really nice to kind of learn about all of that. Fantastic. But the last thing I'd just like to ask you is, what would you say to anyone who is really passionate about making schools an inclusive place and is thinking about whether they could do that through governance? What you might say to anyone who's thinking about becoming a school governor to support inclusivity?
I think Susannah's already mentioned enthusiasm, and I've always felt that from her in the governing body at the school. I think that that willingness to get involved, and to see the children grow and it grow in confidence and support that wider ethos of positivity, I think is a wonderful contribution to make, and is not. I mean, enthusiasm isn't. It's not a difficult thing to bring. I don't think. Would be.
No, I totally agree. As I say, training I think is really key, because you do need to know sort of vaguely what you're talking about, really. And as I say, that is key. And as long as you've got that and some enthusiasm, seriously, I was really lucky because we got brilliant SENco at the school, so that was fantastic. Who was also very enthusiastic and had lots of good ideas. And I think the rest of the staff also did, to be fair. You managed to get the rest of the staff very on board with this whole sort of idea, didn't you? Which was lovely. It really is a sort of excellent staff team kind of working together. It is very much a team effort. And I think, and also with Leyla being, I think it's really important that the SENco is on the senior leadership team, because then she has input into sort of things like curriculum and the school development plan, and that those sort of things are really important to make sure that the inclusivity is there right at the beginning when plans are made and curriculums are discussed.
Golden thread.
Yeah, so I think that's a really useful thing to have your SENco on the senior leadership team, definitely. Yeah, but as I say, being the SEN's governor, I think, is amazing. It is one of the best ones, I have to say, and it may be that I have to give it up soon, but I should miss that very much, because these children, I just think, are just so wonderful. We have an annual talent show at school, which happened at the end of last term, and there were several of our SEND pupils taking part in the talent show. And I'm just always amazed. Well, it's difficult to stand up in front of the whole school and judges and perform anyway, so I'm always impressed by anybody who can do that. But the fact that these SEND children got up and did so well is just wonderful to see, and it just makes me so proud. It's one of those kind of wow moments, really, that make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I think, oh gosh, that's so wonderful to see. Yeah, that's pretty special.
I think that's so lovely. Anyone who is really thinking about being a school governor and kind of helping to champion inclusivity, after hearing that, and what a lovely kind of, I don't know, inspiring story, that would be really nice to kind of see people getting involved in governance, because that sounds great. It sounds like such lovely, positive, important work, having such a great impact on those pupils. So that must be really, really wonderful. So thank you so much both for your time and your insight. It's been really lovely to talk to you. I'm feeling very inspired now myself. I'm going to go back to my own school, my own board, and then ask some questions and reflect a little bit on the way that we do things, which is one of my favourite things about talking to other governors, because it's always nice to learn. But thank you both so much for your time. It's been amazing.
Oh, you're very
welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.